Today I'm going to show you guys how to install a custom tachometer and speedometer into a Chev half-ton. This is my slightly customized 81 Chev half-ton. My daily drive I run year-round. Right now it's winter time. I got the winter tires on, so of course they're different size. This is the interior. It's got factory tachometer, speedometer, original all gauge package. The speedometer doesn't seem to work anymore, so what I'm installing is the new Speedhut tachometer and speedometer, and keeping the old original volt, oil pressure, temperature, and fuel gauges. These are Speedhut's new legacy gauges. It's the tachometer, speedometer, which I had custom made with both miles per hour and kilometers onto the gauge. And the reason I think these will work good is because they are low profile. They only are about 1 inch deep on the back, not like the 3-inch depth on like the odometer gauges, which you have to cut out the back of your cluster. And I'm going with a custom blue lighting with them. Got some new lights to add to the original cluster to bring the rest of the gauges up to the blue lighting standards. And since this speedometer is adjustable, you also need the speedometer speed sensor, which you hook right up to the transmission. Okay, now I got the face plate off and the stereo out. It's time to remove the cluster. Okay, now I got the cluster removed. And as you can see, we will no longer need the speedometer cable, so I'll have to get under the truck after a bit and pull that out. And it'll just be a wire going down in its place. So we can adjust the speedometer to whatever gear ratio, tire size, whatever we need. Since my original tachometer still works, I don't want to damage it. So what I did, I went to the local auto wrecker, picked up a fuel gauge which sits in the same location as some tachometers. And what I'll do, I'll remove the needle and the back of the gauge using the original mounting, and I'll drill a 3 7/8 inch hole which the gauges fit into, mount the gauge into that position, and with a minor modification should fit into the cluster. What I've done is I've mounted the old fuel gauge to a board using some screws just to hold it in place while I drill the hole. It's clamped, this way it shouldn't make a mess when I'm cutting. tachometer. As you can see, it's the exact same size as the fuel gauge plate that I cut out. Now, because this won't fit yet, the old instrument light or idiot lights here, I'm going to have to cut that out of there so that I have room for the gauge. These are no longer going to be used, but that's not a big deal. It's just a brake light and a fasten seatbelt light. So if it's important to you, then don't do it. If it doesn't matter, then you're going to have to cut that piece out of there. And I'll have to do the same thing for the speedometer too. Cut these plastic pieces out of here. The RPM gauge came with a high beam indicator light I had added to it. You can have that and or signal lights, but because the signal lights on the Chevys are down here out of the way, they're no longer, you don't need to have them added to the gauges. But the high beam indicator light will be taken out. After I removed the gauge off the mount, filed the edges smooth, and there's a small corner in the bottom here that I had to pound flat because it wouldn't let the gauge sit in there. So now that everything's pounded out, we'll see how the gauge fits. Look at that, fits real nice now. It's just a matter of putting the backing ring on and hold it in place. That should work perfect. After cutting it for a while, what I used was a soldering iron with a flat tip. It made it a little easier to get in there without not having to have a partner hold this thing from flying all over the place. I've now put the cutout piece in there. And now I'll see if you can see the clearance in here now for the gauge to fit into. Now I'll put the gauge in, and if I have to do any minor trimming, it won't be much now. It's almost there. See, and now I haven't damaged the back of the cluster at all, keeping the original circuit board here, so that because I'm still using some of the old gauges, so I need the circuit board so that I can operate the gauges and use the light circuits for lighting up the gauges. What's nice about these gauges, they come with a nice locking ring, which just screws onto the back of the gauge and mounts it very securely and straight into the panel that I cut out, because it was quite weak after cutting the big hole in it, so it actually stiffens it right back up. So straighten the gauge where I need it, do a trial fit. Fits really nice into the panel now. Just have a little bit more trimming to do. The trim ring is just touching the cluster a bit. Be a couple of minutes and I'll have that ready. So now I got the gauge in place. You can see I put the cover plate on and it fits nicely. And it fits just like stock, so when I put the clear cover plate on, it'll fit without any more modifications. The gauge fits in there exactly like factory. Now I removed all the guts out of the speedometer, put it into place, put the trim plate on, and now What I did with the other gauge is I had to play with it a little bit because I drilled through the center hole thinking it was in the center of the trim ring. It isn't. So that's what took me a little longer to get that fit in there. But now, with the Speedo in place, I used a pair of calipers to find the center point. The center point is actually just a hair high from the center here, so it's about an 1/8 inch high. So now when I drill this, I'll just oblong the hole and start at that point, and it should line up a lot better onto the trim ring. As you can see there, the gauge clears without touching anything, and you don't need to cut out anymore. Should work perfect. And there they are. Sitting flush just like factory gauges. Now with the gauge turned over, you can see I just pulled the wires through where the Speedo cable was and at the back of the instrument panel. You didn't need to cut any holes here. Since the new gauges are lighted, all I'm going to do, I'm going to put some blank plugs in. Blank light bulb sockets, and I'll put them in the holes just to hold the circuit board in place. And then what I'm doing for the lighted ones on the small gauges, I bought these new LEDs. They're a little stick light. They're supposed to be about 18 times brighter than a standard bulb. They're all blue to match the main gauges, so they should look really good when they're in there. And I'm going to just mount them in the 3 positions here, here, and up here, and maybe one here just to light up the gear shift indicator. The rest aren't required. Now, for some people, they find they always have to buy a circuit board because they're losing contact on the circuits with these bulbs twisting on them. All you have to do, all you need is a silver conductor pen, and it's just like a little ball pen. You just cover the old circuit where it was broken out or corroded, and it just makes new contact again. It's simple, easy fix. No need to buy a new circuit board. I've mounted the programming buttons underneath the dash, one for each the tachometer and the speedometer. This is the location of the one for the tachometer on the right side. And I put the Speedo on the left side. Here we go. She's all back together. Gauges look almost factory. You'd almost never tell the difference. Still using the old gauges. See what the lights look like. It's a little hard to tell because the light's on in here. See if this thing will start now. Hopefully I didn't wire something wrong. Looks like she's ready to go. Give her a road trip, set the speedometer, and I should be back on the road. After calibrating the speedometer and tachometer today, just thought I'd take it out for a test drive at night to see what all the gauges look like and how they work. You can barely tell with the old gauges and the new gauges the difference the lighting makes, and new and old both work together really well.